So I would like to introduce my friend and esteemed colleague, Bonnie Nuttkinson. That's okay. I never know what to expect when I see Bonnie. But that is a good thing. Bonnie and I have been able to be part of many different projects and activities for the past 4 to 5 years. And Bonnie, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you tell our group a little bit about what you do with the Alzheimer's Association.
So you guys know a lot of this information, so some of these slides I'm just going to pass right over because I didn't get a chance to see some of Rob's slides before, so just pretend I'm not even flying forward and we'll be good. I want to thank Mikki for the introduction. Just a side note, I've been with the Alzheimer's Association it'll be 4 years in August. Prior to that, I worked in supportive home care for 6.5 years and helped family caregivers utilize some of the technologies I'm going to be talking about today. And I'll be using some examples from families that I've worked with and how they've utilized some of the technology available. So one of the biggest things is, we know, right, the goals of assistive technology is to promote independence and autonomy, help manage potential risk in and around the home, help with memory and recall, support a person with dementia to maintain some abilities, and to provide reassurance to caregivers and help them to feel less stressed. So we know that's the goal of all of the assistive technology, but the one thing that it's all going to come back to is how useful can some of the apps and the resources actually be when you are working with somebody who cognitively is not able to learn new information. And I know Rob went through some of that this morning about the dementia process and how it affects the brain and what that looks like. So just keep in mind as we go throughout everything today or this afternoon about what that actually looks like and how we're going to utilize some of these resources. So really breaking it down into 3 categories of how we can look at assistive technology for helping somebody with dementia will be memory impairment and disorientation, ensuring safety, and improve emotional status and decrease behavioral problems. So when we look at memory impairment and disorientation, you know, we're looking for things like tile. Do any of you use tile? Do you have a tile? No one here? It's find your tile, like you put it on your keys, so if you lose your keys, you can use your technology to find it. You can activate the tile and then you're able to find your set of keys. If any of you misplace your keys frequently, look into that. It's a lot of these things that we're going to talk about today aren't necessarily designed and built for somebody with dementia in mind. They're technology that exists for people of differing abilities, for the general public, and for the aging population, but they're becoming tweaked over time for people with dementia. So a lot of them didn't start out that way. It was more general aging. And if we're starting out with general aging and then we're trying to adapt something to dementia, does that seem like it's going to be like a great idea? If somebody can't learn something new, and we're trying to get them to utilize something new technology-wise. So we'll just keep that in mind. I think there's really great forms and things you can use for technology to help someone, but we always have to remember that that person isn't able to learn new things and remember the new things to be able to continue utilizing them. So a lot of these things that I'm talking about are only really useful when somebody maybe is diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment or living in those early stages without being diagnosed, or in the very early stages of the disease process, or they have a care partner right there next to them to help them utilize the resources, which then takes away why you have the resource, right? If you have the care partner helping to cue them through. So I'm not dogging, I guess, that's not a great term, assistive technology with dementia. It's just much more complicated than it could be with others of differing abilities. That's what the biggest difference is here. So I'm not going to give you any big aha things today that like, this is going to be great, we're going to use it in every home. because that's just not the reality of this. There's a making and receiving phone calls. So how many of you have seen the big telephones, right? Where you can put like a person's picture, you can put the number, you can put just one button and hit it and say whatever you need to do and it gives the command. So there's things like that, but the person has to know that something's going on, that they need to make the call, or they have to understand, okay, I want to go ahead and really make a call to someone because something's going on in my house and I don't know what to do. That takes a lot of reasoning, right, and processing to go through. So some of those things about, there's a lot of great technology for making and receiving phone calls, but is that person going to remember to utilize it? Is that person going to remember how to utilize it? How many of you have tried to give somebody maybe who is having some cognitive impairment a smartphone and they hadn't had one before? Any of you do that? Any of you tried to give someone, right? What did that look like, the lady in the back chuckling? You're laughing because you relate, so share why you're relating. Right? So there is something where we can teach, I don't like this phrase either. Apparently I'm using phrases about dogs today. You can't teach old dogs new tricks, but that's not true. We're all capable of learning new things, except for if we have a cognitive impairment. That's where we're not able to learn new things. So if you think giving somebody this fancy smartphone, oh, you can put your appointment reminders on there, your medication reminders, you'll be able to FaceTime you or Google Hangout. Well, if that person has never used that type of technology before, are they going to use it if they are not able to learn and remember what they've learned? No, right? So that's the thing where we have some of this great technology, but sometimes smartphones is not the technology that's going to be useful. It might be useful for you or I. I know my phone tells me where to go, and that's where I go. Like, I was on vacation when they had the call for the presenters, and I never got the information that we were moved locations, so my calendar told me to come here, or not here, the other place. So I went where my calendar told me to go, and I was like, oh, this isn't the right place. You know, I maybe rely too much on technology myself. Have any of you heard of families now using like Alexa sometimes instead of pendants? Like they'll call Alexa, they'll have Alexa call mom, or Alexa call Susie. Have you guys seen people do that before? Yeah? Has it been successful or not? You want to share?
Yes and no, depending upon the stage of the disease process.
Yeah.
We have one family where they have the echo show,
Yep.
and so they're able to call in to mom and check on her, and she can test her blood sugars, you know, in front of the echo show, and that's been very, very great. If she's doing no interacting with it, she isn't the one turning it on.
Yeah. But so that is one piece of technology where you can call in and it will automatically answer. So you don't have to wait for that person to answer. Like if you're trying to Facebook message or Facebook call someone, that's how I talk to my niece and nephew. If my sister doesn't answer, it just gives me an answering machine I can leave a message on, where Echo Show is one of the newer products that can be very beneficial. My father-in-law is 57 and has frontotemporal dementia. And up until a few months ago, he lived by himself. And my wife and I went to the Ellen show, and when we were at Ellen, we were there for a giveaway day, and we got 2 Echo Shows. We each got one, right? And we're like, okay, this is going to be great because we can go and we can check in on him and see what's going on, and until the living situation's changed and somebody's with him. And it's worked out pretty good for us, but at the same time, he falls a lot. Part of his other health issues is his legs just give out. It doesn't matter if he's using something to assist with his mobility. He just, down there he goes. And he's a big guy, so it's a pretty big fall. And he was trying to get, he's like, Alexa, call so-and-so. Well, where he fell was out of earshot for Alexa to be able to hear him. And it was, I don't remember what she said back, but, you know, she said something where it wasn't able to hear. And he was so shocked from his fall and stunned that he couldn't project more, and he's kind of a quiet guy anyways. He thinks I'm like too loud on a regular basis for him. So, you can just imagine, like for him yelling is probably like me talking like this. So he wasn't able to activate it, and I referred them to the local ADRC. I'm like, here's the questions you need to ask. And right when we're working with people within our own families, like they don't listen to us, right? Saw the eye roll, you know exactly how that goes. It's like difficult. So we're like, well, hey, at least if he has this, if he's refusing to take the steps to actually get some sort of pendant, right, that we know about, maybe this will be useful. And so what we did is we were able to get another Echo Dot or something and put it in another area in the house connected to something else in the two areas he most frequently uses. So hopefully there won't be the problem of Alexa not being able to hear him to call, because Alexa will not call 911 when he tried to do it. I haven't gotten a chance to look into the specifics behind that, but there's probably a lot of prank calls. I would assume that would happen, because he was running out of people once she started to recognize her voice. He couldn't think of what numbers were connected to his Alexa. Medication reminders. So how many of you have people with dementia you work with where they need medication reminders, or families you work with? What are things you guys have suggested for them? Anyone? Mm-hmm. You want to tell everybody what the Med Center is? Oh, is there one out there? Otherwise you can have this. There you go.
The Med Center has 31 separate medication containers, so you can distribute an entire month's worth of medication at once, which can really help with those complicated routines. I was supporting a woman with dementia, and she had to take a whole pill the first day, half a pill the second day, skip the third day, and then repeat that throughout the month. And this woman had dementia. It also has a reminder, an auditory reminder that you can use, and it doesn't stop until you turn it off. So it keeps nagging you until you actually take your meds, or at least approach it and turn it off, which is great if you happen to be outside getting the newspaper or talking to a neighbor or whatever. When it's time to take your meds, you don't miss the reminder.
Do you want to share too?
There's also a lot of apps for the phones and for the watches, and if they're using that technology already, I tend to stick with what they already know and try to use that.
Thank you. Look, I didn't even have to put a presentation together. You guys could do it for me.
There's also one that's a little bit pricey at the start, and then there's a monthly fee, but it's something that's hooked up to your telephone, and it's especially helpful because it locks, and it will unlock at a specific time that's programmed into it. It will release the medications and then lock again, and it will also notify a caregiver if the medication isn't taken. So.
Thanks for sharing some of those different levels and types of medication reminders. And so that's the nice thing, depending on where that person is at cognition-wise. We don't want to get them something that's so advanced, like if they don't need the lock, if they don't need it to lock afterwards, we don't want to spend the money and resources on something that is going to be so fancy that it's going to cause them more hassle. And so that's one of the hardest things, is finding the right type of pillbox for where that person is at. For my father-in-law's birthday, we got him a med center. Ooh, what a great birthday present, right? And he has his med center set up. His wife now lives back home with him full time. Long story, we don't have to go there, but so she's there. But what she has a whole bunch of pills and other health issues herself, right? So even though she could remind him, she's got to remember her own stuff and what she needs to do. And so she fills his med center once a month, and she just lets him with the reminders and shutting it off. And he actually will get annoyed. He's like, because he has mobility issues, why aren't you shutting that off? You're closer. And she's like, no, you need to stay in that routine for that. And as you're not able to do that safely, I'll take care of that, or we'll move it closer to you. And he was just like, oh, well, what are you doing? Reminding and prompting. So there are a lot of great apps out there that help us with reminders. Probably, do you guys use apps for yourself? Reminders, to-do lists. You know, like I said, my phone beeps and tells me where to go, and I go. If it's in there wrong, that's my fault. But so there's a lot of those things that can be useful, but really they're only useful when that person is in the very early stages. Otherwise, they can cause confusion. Like, people aren't used to different sounds coming out of a phone. So I worked with someone who had utilized a smartphone and apps and reminders, and their daughter had set it all up for them, and they were pretty good with it. But then as they started to progress to the mid-stage of their disease, the daughter had it set on some weird like chime and chirp. You know how you can set your phone to all these different sounds? Well, the father was like, what is going on? And he thought that that chirp was there was something in the house. He wasn't able to put together that those two things went together until, because he had the cell phone like hid under things too. If he's not using it, he didn't have it right out in front of him. And so sometimes it is using sounds like alarms. It's actually, if you're using those, have the sound set that actually sound like something that person's going to be able to identify with, even though maybe earlier in the disease process they were able to respond to a chirp or chimes or whatever it might be. And then the orientating to month, day, and time. So many times I work with families where somebody will call and the family all lives out of town, and they'll be like, my mom calls me 5 times a day asking what day of the week it is, what's going on, what the weather's going to be like. And, you know, she'll call me back 20 minutes later and ask me the same thing. And there's many great clocks out there, that big clocks that show pictures that have that month, the day, and the time. And some of them will even have weather. It will show the weather forecast with just like the sun or the clouds or the clouds and the rain or the snowflakes. And those can be really beneficial, because your loved one, if you put it, you have to put it in a place where they see it, not a place that you think looks nice or they even think looks nice. It's putting it in a place where they can view it, and then they're able to have that question, look up, and it's right there. I encourage people to put it near the TV if the person likes TV, or near the coffee pot, depending on wherever that person goes on a regular basis. If they sit down and they do the crossword every day from the newspaper at the table, put it there. I have had a couple of families who they had resources to be able to get 2 or 3 of them, because they got one and they put it by the coffee pot, because the mom sits in the kitchen and drinks the coffee till it's gone every day. And then in the afternoon, she sits by her puzzle table, and she never called them in the morning because she was looking at the clock. And then she started to call them in the afternoon while her daughter's in work meetings, and her daughter would be like, Mama, just look at the clock. It'll tell you it's, you know, in the kitchen. Well, she wasn't able to put 2 and 2 together, so it was getting 2 to put in the 2 areas where she most used. So the next is safety. And how much did Rob talk about this? Quite a bit, because I don't want to have some of the things been duplicates already. I don't want to over-duplicate, because right, it's the end of the day. I don't want you guys to... Which one was that? Okay, summoning help and prevent...
The fall risk we didn't talk about either, Bonnie.
Okay, the fall risk?
Yes.
Okay, so one of the biggest things with falls and what you can do for somebody with dementia is different sensoring lights, motion in the home. And that's one of the biggest things, that it doesn't have to be dementia specific, right? You can just go to Menards and get the $15 motion sensor light and put it there. So when that in the bedroom, so when the person gets up and they start to leave the bedroom, that light comes on. The biggest thing is when you're putting up those motion sensor lights, to make sure that you test them out to see if that person rolls over. I had a gentleman I worked with, and he would always use the urinal next to it, but then he liked to get up and get a new fresh glass of ice water during the night. But if we were to put a motion sensor light, how he would use the urinal, it would go off if you didn't have the light in the right way. So there's many great things with motion sensored lights that can help, but like I said, test them out a few different times to make sure, and make sure the lights aren't blinding. Like a lot of those lights come on and they're like a floodlight, and it's like, what is happening? A lot of times we'll see people having a hard time. They might not turn the light on in the bathroom. And so there's actually these little, have you guys ever seen the lights for your toilet? Yeah, and they have them for people of all ages. I actually bought my boss one for a Christmas gift because her little boy kept missing, they didn't want to turn on the light and he kept missing the toilet. But some people will use that instead of a night light because some individuals, well, you're wasting electricity and they want to keep shutting off lights that are around the house. So sometimes it is actually lights in devices. Also, with preventing falls, this is one of the, it might not always be prevent, but it can help with quicker response time. And this is some of the assistive technology that is the most effective for a caregiver who's caring from a distance. And that is, there's so many different systems, and I was doing some research to try to give you all the systems, but so many of them start up and then they lose funding because they're not able to get enough customers. So some of the places that I knew of when I worked in home care, oh, they no longer exist, or they were bought out by this company. So I didn't give you exact names just due to it's hard to really tell who's in business or who just keeps their nice website up. But what it is you can take and put little tabs all around the house in different areas. Have you guys seen this before? So it's like you take their, some people call them tags, and some of them are shaped like a guitar pick, and you decide, okay, tag A1 is going to go on the kitchen door. And if tag A1 isn't motion activated, after 4 hours, an alarm is going to be sent to the monitoring company. And so you can take these and you can put them all over the house, and you can have them timed for how often that person should be getting up and utilizing them. Like, not should, but switch that around. And so people will put them even on the sink handle, because a lot of times maybe in the bathroom if the person always washes their hands. They'll put them all over the house on doors to know when a door is motion censored. And those are attached to a monitoring company. Sometimes it might be a home care company. It might be who actually owns those. And they'll be set up just like a lifeline where they have family members that you contact. The thing is with those programs is they're very expensive, right? So technology is awesome, but technology is expensive. Think about our smartphones, right? Our smartphones are super expensive. And I always tell people before families think that a smartphone is going to be an answer for somebody with dementia, stop and think about what you might want to use. Maybe a monitoring system like this is going to be something that is going to be much more beneficial. It might be where maybe that person falls and maybe they get knocked unconscious. It's great if they have a lifeline, but if they're not awake, they can't hit the lifeline, right? Where with this type of monitoring system, if in the next 2 hours they don't go and open the bathroom door or whatever it might be, that alarm's going to go and it's going to set off a sensor to the monitoring company, and then that monitoring company is going to call. So those are two of the biggest things. One's more of a prevention piece, and the other is just maybe a quicker response. Yeah. Okay. Oh, you have the microphone.
Thank you. There are pendants available that have a fall detection. So, because I always wondered about that too. If you fall and hit your head, you're not going to be able to hit the button. So they're coming along with increasing the technology in those, which is good to see.
One of the biggest things about the tab system and the monitoring around the home system is somebody might see it and think, oh, it doesn't belong there. The home care company I worked at, we were a pilot company for one of those systems that's no longer in business with the tabs around the home to see if that could help a person stay independent longer, even though it's more expensive in the end to maintain, was cheaper than having like 12 to 24-hour home care come in the long run. It's more the setup fees for a lot of those things. And what would happen is the person with dementia was like, why is this there? It shouldn't be there. And so they go around and they try to pick it off. So it's making sure that, oh, you put it inside of the refrigerator handle up high, not where they touch, or not they touch, but up high. So they're not like, what's there? Because then it just became something to fixate on. And so improving emotional status and decrease behavioral problems. How much did Rob talk about this? Did he talk about music and memory at all? So when we think of assistive technology to help with behaviors and emotional problems, a lot of this is not good for long distance caregiving because you have to be there to help that person. By the time they're actually to the point where they're having emotional and behavioral outbursts or expressions, that person is not going to be safe to just be having somebody monitoring them or checking in a couple times with a call. So it can't be a long distance thing. It has to be an in-person, whether it's the family caregiver or a paid caregiver. And one of the biggest things with assistive technology is music and memory. So how many of you have heard? I know Mikki talked about it very briefly. It's in the toolkit she gave you. There was a little card. But have you seen music and memory in use? Somebody want to explain it to the group of what it's like? Keeps you more alert so you don't have to hear my voice all the time. You want to? Hold on, I'll get you the microphone.
I've not seen it in person, but I've seen it several times in different videos, and it's amazing. Sometimes they'll show a person slumped over in a wheelchair in a care facility, almost non-responsive. They put headphones on or earbuds in, play music that the person was familiar with, maybe from another time in their life, and then they're up, they're alert, they're making eye contact, they're singing, they're talking when they haven't been talking. It's just, it kind of gives you the shivers to see how cool it is. So, and I'm sure it's not, ubiquitous, it's not 100%, but when it works great.
Thank you very much. That's one of my little tricks for keeping you alert, is you get to hear other voices, not just my own. In case any of you want to use that, I picked that up from somebody else somewhere along the line. So music and memory, yes, that's exactly what it is. The state of Wisconsin is very fortunate. We were the second state, right, that started this program statewide, and we started it in nursing homes and and then it moved to assisted living facilities, and now there's actually grants, and it's just in Dane County, though, I think. The grants for libraries to have the music and memory program where they can have individuals from the community come, and there's a librarian or volunteers who are trained to help put together that playlist. But what we see is that with music, right, you're like, why do we need an iPod or something like that? Can't we just use a CD player and have it out in the room? Well, we know if we just have music playing in the room, like say we had some background music right now, that's not going to connect for that person with dementia. They have to have it on their ears, right up next to their ears, so they can really connect. Otherwise, it's just like white noise for them. And that's where we're starting to see people use iPod shuffles and any sort of MP3 type of device. And they come up with the music that is the music that represents their life and who they are and is the soundtrack for their life. Can anybody guess what age range is the music that you most connect with? How old you were when you listened to that?
Before age 24.
Yep, so about 15 to 21-ish. So think about what you guys listen to from 15 to 21. What do people listen to here? I listen to rap and country. Journey, I know, right? I don't know. I grew up in northern Wisconsin. Let's just blame it on that. And what else do people listen to? Smashing Pumpkins. So, right, not all of you, even if you're in the same age range, are going to relate to that, because just because we've started and that maybe, so a lot of times if people don't know where to start, they say, well, pick the decade when that person was in their late teens and early 20s and just play a greatest hits from that decade. That's a starting place if sometimes families aren't able to give us a lot of information, or maybe there's not families involved to give us information. And then from there, watching how that person responds and narrowing it down and making sure that we get that iPod shuffle to be something that relates to them. I have a gentleman that I'm working with right now, and finally, after about a year, his wife is going to do music in memory through the Sun Prairie Library, right? We have to give suggestions a few times, and then maybe the person will take the suggestion. And she's like, well, I think we'll just call him Dave. I think Dave is going to hate this little iPod thing. And I'm like, he doesn't have to do anything with it. He always wears a shirt with a pocket here. You just put it on continuous, and it'll just go for him. Well, they're trying to figure out what music would work for him. So they started out with the music of his decade, because his wife, they married, they're a second marriage, so she doesn't know him from younger, only some things that he reported. And he just wasn't relating to it, and she was starting to get really discouraged. Like, I thought this was supposed to help. Even I could go to the store and put this on, and at least, you know, it would maybe put him in a better mood, so when I come back, it's not like he's ruffled through things or has gotten upset because I left him. Well, when he was that age, he was a singer, and his grandpa was the one who taught him songs, and it was songs from the grandpa's childhood that he most related to. So he was relating to songs that barely none of us had ever heard of, from like 1910, 1915, because they were songs from the grandpa's childhood. And it was like, whoa, how are we going to find some of these, right? That's a lot harder. We can find even 20s and 30s, but going back a little further. So what they're in the process of doing is he comes to some early stage groups, and he likes to sing those songs. So while I'm like setting up the laptop, he sings, and we're considering taping him and then putting that on the iPod is one of the things we're working on right now, because we've got this great technology, we've got this great thing that should help the caregiver, but it was so long ago that we don't have a lot of the songs recorded, or it's just sheets, you know, just the lyrics to something. There's many different things too. Did Rob talk about the sensory rooms or the reminiscence rooms? I just wasn't certain. His agency has been doing a project with that, where what people will do is they'll take a room and they will fill it with things from a different decade or era to help make that person hopefully more calm or feel more relaxed. And we're starting to see those in hospitals, and some other places like clinics are starting to get on board with that concept. Mikki, can you tell me where we're at with the time? Okay, cool. Got a few more minutes, right? 3:45, I think is. So one of the biggest things is we think about, oh, great, if we have a family who's a long-distance caregiver, like maybe the family that lives in the area doesn't have to come over as often. You ever work with families like that or think that? I was meeting with a family last night out in Sun Prairie, and a daughter and son lived in Sun Prairie, but one of them just moved to Nashville, and it was the one who was most involved in mom's day-to-day care. And then the other son lives in Evansville, and the other daughter lives in Linden Station. So we got about an hour and a half, 2-hour radius outside of Madison with the people that live within the state. And they're trying to figure out what they can do technology-wise to reduce the siblings that live in town having to run there all the time to check on mom if she doesn't answer the phone, if after the caregiver leaves. They do have help 6 hours a day, 5 in the morning, 1 in the evening, but maybe the caregiver reports that mom isn't in a good mood, so they want to check on her to see, is she okay, what's going on. And there's nothing you can really do to replace getting your eyes on that person and seeing them. But what they have is that they have a granny cam. Any of you, they just set it up like 2 months ago. Any of you have seen families use granny cams? They're usually families that have funds available, and they made sure, because right, this goes into some of the things Rob maybe talked about with ethics and what that looks like and respecting people's privacy. They have it set up so when she is in the bathroom on the toilet, they make sure they can see the top of her head, but nothing else to, make sure that they're respecting her privacy. They really were very thoughtful about it. And so what they do now, instead of sending over one of the siblings, is they have, each of them takes turns of who's monitoring the cam in the hours when the caregivers aren't there. And they have a pretty good system, and then if that person can't find mom on the cam somehow, then they send the family member who lives nearby over. But that works for that family, and that's only going to work for a short period of time. They were like, well, can you tell me how long this system will work for us? And no, right? That's one of the hardest things with dementia care is we don't know it's not okay till it's not okay, because it can be just fine 1 minute and the next minute there's complete crisis breaking out. What we talked about in the beginning is a lot of the things aren't designed specifically for people with dementia. So even the reminder apps and to-do lists and all of those things, they're meant for people with normal cognitive functioning. So there's still processes to use them. Think about our executive functioning, and if that is affected, how many steps it takes to use an app, to actually use an app. I mean, that's quite a few steps, right? You have to know you're going to go into the app, then you have to go into the app, then you have to decide, oh, was I looking at this list? Was I looking at this list? What does that look like when, right there are several steps, and that person could have problems with each one of those steps. And I know Rob talked about the ethical issues this morning, and so that's one of the biggest things is, okay, what's the balance between safety and is this actually ethical to do? And right now I know there's, I think, is it 2 silver alerts? Well, one's a silver alert and one's a green alert going on. And so some of those things, right, it's like if the person is still early stage enough, will this protect them? Is this something we need for them? My mom, side note, my dad, we've been concerned about his cognitive abilities for, about 5-6 years. Well, I have been, and in the last 2 years, my mom's on board that, very early stage, but something is happening with him cognitively. My dad lives up in northern Wisconsin, and him and his buddies go on their UTVs all over the place. So these places are like back roads that don't even have fire numbers. It's like logging trails. And so I was trying to convince my mom that I think it would be good if we put something on there. We don't even have to necessarily tell Dad, but the reason she started to consider it now is because one day one of his friends always calls my mom and says, okay, Rick just left us at this point. He should be home in 30 minutes, gives her the estimate of how long it should take since they all go their different ways home. Well, my dad came home 90 minutes later because he got lost. Now, getting lost in the woods, even there's not great service, so will that thing work all the time? Maybe, maybe not. Will it fall off the undercarriage? But when that happened, my mom was like, okay, I'm not going to worry about affecting his privacy or what. I'd rather have peace of mind than not do that. But that's just my own personal family. Everybody is in a different situation. And then the cost, right? These things are expensive. They're really expensive. And to think about how long are they going to be effective for? Is it worth the cost or is it not? Hopefully it is. That's where we encourage people to really look at and talk to an occupational therapist. They're usually pretty good at giving recommendations. And then is there any other sort of solution that can be put in place besides assistive technology if the assistive technology is going to have a high cost to it? And then just thinking of the person's needs, preferences, and abilities to use devices and how it might change over time. Like that one gentleman I told you he had used a smartphone and was okay with it, and then after a few years of his disease progressing, he wasn't able to connect with that anymore, so it was becoming more of a problem than a solution. And then, so I'm just going to wrap up because I know we have to. Determining whether to use a specific assistive technology product. We always encourage people to ask other caregivers what they found to be helpful, especially if maybe they go to support groups. Reach out to other caregivers because a lot of times many families have tried different things. And so I actually spend time connecting families to share, hey, are you okay if I release your information to XYZ so they can contact you about did the granny cam work or was it a waste of money? Or what did you think about this med box? Because sometimes hearing it from somebody else in that situation can be really helpful. We always say pick the simplest product available to meet the need. And then always ask if you can use it on a trial basis or ask what the return policy is to know what that looks like. So, I mean, some things are as cheap as $5, $10. Some are expensive as up to the $900, $1,000 depending on what you're looking at, especially there's home safety things for stoves that can automatically shut off the gas if it's been left on too long. those things aren't cheap. They're very good, but they're not cheap. And how long will mom actually be using the stove? So here are the resources that I used for compiling the presentation, but the one at the bottom here, the alz.org AAIC, is actually for our International Research Convention, which is happening about a month from the day in Chicago. And one of the big themes that they are focusing on, and they asked researchers to submit, is on technologies and dementia and what it looks like. Because I was trying to look at what are some research things we have funded about long-distance caregiving, and a lot of it, people stopped doing some research with it because it's so difficult and not enough people utilize it, and it's starting to come back as a theme now. So I put that there as a resource because all of that at the end of July will be posted with some new updates of what are some technology that might really help with that long-distance caregiving journey. So that's going to have the newest information in about a month for you. Does anyone have any questions? I hope I kept you awake a little bit as we went through the last part of our day. Who's in charge of wrapping up? Awesome.